Hello, my name's Eric Tolensmeyer, and I'm working with Mary Johnson at Regenerative Farms. We've put together a list of plant species for Emoja Village to be used for better nutrition for women who are pregnant and breastfeeding, and also some species that are perennial that will live for many years that provide protein and carbohydrates and fats. So I think you've already watched part one of this, which sort of goes into the background on how we came up with these categories and how we chose the plants and so on. In this case, we did our best to provide species that were suited to the rainfall and elevation of the closest neighboring town we could find. So they can all grow excuse me, at least 1,000 meters elevation. And the rainfall we got for the area was between 400 and 800 millimeters. So these are all able to grow somewhere in that range. So with that said, I will share the screen and take you for a little walk through some of these species. First, we have a little slide deck, which you will receive. So we've been through the part about what the nutrient deficiencies are and so on already. So I'll jump ahead to the species with the highest iron in your part of the world. And there are two species that have more than the maximum you need in a day if you eat 100 grams. That would be the pods of one legume and the seed of another. These two trees. And then there's a number in the blue category, which provides somewhere between the minimum and maximum that you need for a day. So there's lots of those as well. And this is a mix of leaves and seeds and roots, all different kinds of plants that can provide what you need. And many or most of which are native to the region as well. Then we have a list of those highest in zinc. All of these are seeds or nuts or beans of some kind. And unfortunately, plants are not a spectacular source of iron, but some are higher than others. And in this case, the four of them that are in the dark green are provide between 3/4 and all of the minimum of what you need for to consume in a day. Of those, I will say that the Egusi Kadumu is particularly promising. It's a relative of watermelon. It has fruits about this big, and you eat the seeds just like regular Egusi. The fruit is poisonous, so you only want to eat the seeds on that. But that's an exciting species. Then for vitamin A, again, we have lots of excellent candidates. Chaya being the most powerful, which is not native to the region, but is being grown in some agroforestry projects there. But then there are a number of species that are either widely grown in the area, like muhogo or matambele, or a number that are also indigenous, like sabai and mfungu. So that's exciting that you have lots of great candidates. These are mostly leaves. Many leaves are very high in vitamin A. And then for those highest in folate, again, it's mostly seeds and beans, with the cowpea or kunde being the very best of those, which should certainly be able to grow at your elevation and rainfall very well. Then, so for the woody plants, for the trees and shrubs and woody vines, there are some species that really have multiple nutrients with outstanding levels. So moringa is one of those, but to get them, you have to eat the leaves and the flowers and the pods to get all those benefits. For tamarind as well, it's the seeds and leaves and fruit together provide all these things. Coccinia grandis, that's the perennial cucumber. By eating the leaves and the fruit, you get to these levels. Mulberry leaf, just the leaves are enough. and on down the list. So these are species you can see that if you had enough of these, there's dark green and light green at least across the board, and some purple and blue, which are the super high levels of those nutrients. So these would be species very much worth bringing in, or taking advantage of already having them, perhaps, because they're nutritious in so many ways for the key nutrients that are needed by women who are pregnant and breastfeeding. Then we have some herbaceous plants. These are not woody plants, but things like grasses or annual crops, or plants that grow every year and then die back to the ground and regrow the next year. The cowpea or kunde, of course, is the best of those. It's a really outstanding one between the dry beans, which are really high in folate, and the leaves, which are really high in iron and vitamin A. It's an outstanding food plant. And on down the list here. In fact, I think these are all, well, many of these are annuals. Some of them are perennials. The Lablab, Purpureus legat, and Amphiwi are both perennials, or have perennial forms anyway. And let's talk about perennial staple crops. Because your region is so dry, there is sort of a limited number of species that grow in the area, or that are sort of native to the area or have already been brought to the area. There's some lovely things from far around the world that would be hard to get, although Mary and I have talked about efforts to try and move those things around. But in terms of the things that are already present in the region, and we talked about this bit in the introductory video as well, they have different amounts of carbohydrates and protein and oil. So we were not able to find, in terms of those plants native to the area, any perennial basic starch plants. Bananas and plantains, it's too dry unless you use a lot of irrigation. Breadfruit, it's too cold and too dry. Enset, it's a little too wet, too dry for as well. So without irrigation, we don't have good basic starch perennials, although there are some perfectly nice, and here are some examples. Root crops that will provide that. So the real winner here is the protein oil crops. There are lots of really excellent perennials for protein and oil in your part of the world, and there's at least something in all of them except for basic starch. So some of the perennial balanced carbohydrates, these have starch with also some, or sugar with also some protein and oil. So the tree on the left, it's the pods that are eaten. And there are varieties of sorghum that are perennial. They're sort of not quite fully fantastic yet, but they're very close to done, and some of them are available now. So we could talk about trying to get some seed of that in your hands if people weren't interested. For perennial protein crops, there's the pigeon pea, and there are some varieties of that are fully perennial that will live and fruit well for many years. And the lima bean, which my experience is that the ones that climb are perennial and the ones that are in a bush are annual. So if you grow the climbing ones, they can live for many years. There's one variety called 7 year because it will live for at least 7 years. So those would be very interesting. And they're both of these are very, very nutritious in terms of folate and other kinds of benefits as well. The strongest category, and I think we see this in a lot of dry lands around the world, is crops that are high in oil and protein. It looks to me, from my understanding of where you are, that you may be able to grow cashews there. You should be able to grow cashews. They should be okay with your elevation. It's kind of just about as high as they want to be. And the rainfall shouldn't be a problem for them. And then you get the fruit on those as well as the nuts, although you have to be careful when you process the nuts. There's some very poisonous chemicals involved in taking the nuts apart. The oil inside the shell is very poisonous. Lovi not only has edible nuts and an edible fruit, but the leaves are eaten. And in fact, in Ethiopia, they grow it just for the leaves, which are very nutritious. We have this Egusi kudumu again, which I think would be a great choice and grows in very, very dry places. It shouldn't be scared of your dry conditions at all. And that, again, you eat the seeds. There's mongo or marula is how I know that one. And it's the nuts and also the fruit are great. And lamai is also fruit and nut together combined. For fully oil crops, the only perennial crop I was able to find that's only grown for its oil would be moringa, which should produce oil seeds very well for you, and it's a very high quality oil. But also the plants we just looked at that do protein and oil, any of those can be grown for oil as well. Now, there are annual crops that provide all of these oil and protein and carbohydrates, as you can see in the bottom row here. But we're looking for other perennials that you can add to your agroforestry system, whether they're more trees or things that would grow between the trees or underneath the trees or climb on the trees, that would provide additional food for home use or maybe even for sale. So that is our slide set, and I will, as I said, provide that to you. And we also have, I do need to share screen one more time here. We also have prepared for you a spreadsheet that has the Latin names and names in English. It has names in Samburu or Swahili if I couldn't find Samburu, which is hard to find sometimes. What parts are eaten, how much protein and oil and fiber they have, which nutritional category they fit in. Here are the key nutrients that we're looking for in terms of the deficiencies, the things that are lacking in the diet of so many women in your part of the world. And here is their, whether they're a tree or a vine or an herb or something like that, a shrub, and their shade tolerance, which is helpful in designing agroforestry systems. You want to know what can grow in the shade of other things, and whether they fix nitrogen, which is also very important in agroforestry systems to provide their some of the fertility that's needed. So with that said, that is our second part of our video for today, and I'd be very happy to answer any questions or have a conversation about it at any time. Thank you very much.